Happy Wednesday, y'all. Funny little story. I just ran through a whole video thinking that I was recording and talking, and I wasn't recording. I just had my photo on, and so I took about 10 pictures of myself because it took me about 10 takes to say what I wanted to say. But now I'm actually recording, so I promised y'all that I would share a little bit about how we got to where we are and Trey's diagnosis. I know a couple of folks came back and was like, did I miss the diagnosis? No, you didn't miss it. We just didn't share it. But I did promise that I would talk a little bit about how we got to where we are today. So this is going to be a longer video. It won't be my quick little 2-minute. It'll probably be, I don't know how long, but it'll be a little bit longer. So we kind of have to go a little bit back in time to get to where we are today. So some of you may know, some of you may not know, Trey was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called sarcoidosis years ago. And by years, I'm talking like, I don't know, between a decade and 2 decades ago. So shortly after we got here in San Antonio, we found a doctor that finally helped us figure out what was going on, and it was sarcoidosis. So it can manifest in a lot of different ways, and for Trey, it manifested in his lungs. And so he had some granulomas in his lungs, and he's been treated for that. There's no cure for sarcoidosis, similar to blood cancer, but there are things that can treat it and help it go into remission, if you will. So Trey has been on steroids for a long time, since he got diagnosed with sarcoidosis. So fast forward a decade or so, and long-term steroid use can develop other issues. And so he developed diabetes from the steroid use, which he was managing. He's been managing that for a couple of years now. But he has had for a long time a goal to try to get off of the steroids because it really kind of tears up your body. Earlier this year, we also found out that he had kidney disease, again, a side effect of both the diabetes and the steroids. And so learning that, I think Trey felt more compelled to try to get off of the steroids, because anything that is an NSAID, which of course prednisone is like a major NSAID, any of those non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs affect your kidney pretty significantly. So he had a big push to try to get off of the steroids. So fast forward a little bit to the springtime, and Trey was finally able to get off of the prednisone. Well, as he came off of that prednisone, his body started to hurt really badly. So he would just say, my skeleton hurts. Like he could, there were days when he felt like he could barely walk. He could barely move, and his whole body was just aching. Easy for me to look back now and have an understanding of it. In that moment, I didn't understand just how bad it was. So he, would take Tylenol. He would do things to try to alleviate that. So we went to a nephrology appointment to kind of check in on things and see. When you have sarcoidosis, you yearly have to get all of your major organs checked, because it can affect any major organ: your skin, your eyes, your heart, your lungs, your kidneys, and it can affect any major organ in your body. So you really go to all the specialists once a year and you get things checked. So we went in to talk to the nephrologist and found out that, hey, you now have stage 3. 3 is broken into A and B. You have stage 3A kidney disease. It's a little bit of a blow for us, right? So here I am. I just donated a kidney 2 years ago, and we're finding out he had kidney disease, and it was hard. It was a hard conversation. It was a diagnosis we weren't really expecting, on top of everything that was going on. And they decided to run some more tests. And so I may get things a little out of order as I'm going through this, because some of it is a little bit of a blur, but you'll get the gist of how we got to where we are today. So I mentioned at this point, Trey had come off of his steroids. His body was really sore. We found out about the kidney disease. He's trying to manage that pain, and so the nephrologist, of course, said, well, we don't want you on steroids. Let's see if we can find you some other pain relievers. And so, he went on some other stuff to try to help, and it just really wasn't helping very much. So he found a little bit of relief, but not the relief that he was really looking for. So they continued to run some blood work, and kind of the beginning of summer, if you will, those results started to come back, and we started to see that there is something in our blood work called light chains. There's lambda and kappa free light chains, and those were out of whack. And so one number was really, really huge, and then the ratio of the two was really, really low, which is kind of a red flag in your blood work. And so, of course, there's other markers that they look for. Because Trey's body was in so much pain, they also did some blood panels looking for any kind of rheumatoid arthritis or anything like that, and that was all negative. So nephrology referred us to hematology, who continued to run some more blood work and decided, hey, you know what, we probably need to go ahead and do what's called a PET scan, as well as a bone marrow biopsy. And so we went ahead and had that work done. I will say, it's poor Trey. He has always been an interesting, I'm using air quotes, interesting patient. And it's never fun when you're an interesting patient. So lo and behold, his PET scan results came back, and they were interesting, very interesting, in fact. So again, it's pertinent that he came off of his steroids, because what had happened was his sarcoidosis ramped way up. So the steroids were in fact suppressing it, which we didn't know exactly what it was doing for the sarcoidosis, but it was majorly suppressing it. So he started to notice under his skin, like in his wrists and on his arms, he had started to notice kind of bumps, if you will. They call them granulomas. And they were bothering him, they were sore spots, and he had one in particular in his ankle that was really bothering him. And at the time, we did not know that it was the sarcoidosis, but looking back, and once we saw the results of the PET scan, we saw. So now he's got the sarcoidosis running rampant in his body, as well as myeloma. So fast forward again, and the results from the PET scan were back. The results from the bone marrow biopsy were back. When they're looking for myeloma, of course, just like with any disease, right? They look at progression of the disease, where are we at with things, and they have certain criteria that they look for. And so once they got all the results of the test back, they came back and said, yeah, you do have stage 2 multiple myeloma. It's impacting your kidneys. And so if you look at myeloma criteria, they use this acronym called CRAB, C-R-A-B. And so one of the key components in that is the R, which is renal function impairment. And so while we thought that maybe the kidney function decline was because of the prednisone and the diabetes, which certainly did contribute to it, it turns out that it's also the myeloma. And so the reason it's multiple myeloma is because it's impacting multiple parts of his body. So the kidneys being one of those. So lo and behold, in July, we had the diagnosis of multiple myeloma stage 2. And so I think we sat with that for a while. Fortunately or unfortunately, I am who I am. And so when I started to see all the results from his blood work come back, I started to do a lot of digging and trying to understand what was going on. And so I think, although I'm not a doctor, clearly, I had a better idea of what we were going to hear from a diagnosis perspective than maybe Trey did. Again, just because I am who I am and I dig in. But I think Trey had a phenomenal outlook and perspective in that, he said, I really don't want to do that kind of digging because I want to maintain my optimism about all of this. And so if I go and I read, oh my gosh, this prognosis and, what is the half-life and what does it look like, then your mind, can take hold of those things, and it can send you down a path that maybe you don't want to go down. And if you start to think negative thoughts and you start to think about the worst case scenario, a lot of times those things become your reality. So he did a great job of letting me do that digging and seeing what's what, but he kind of stayed on the side and said, you know what? The goal of all of this just needs to be remission. I need to do what I need to do, and I need to get into remission. And so that has been his focus, and it continues to be his focus. And so I'm extremely proud of him for having a phenomenal attitude about all of this and for focusing on the right things, right? We're not going to worry about worst case scenarios or anything like that. We're going to focus on getting me to remission. with all of that, part of the not necessarily sharing the diagnosis was immediately when you tell somebody you have cancer, they're like, worst case scenario, right? What is the worst case scenario? I'm not going to say it out loud, but everybody's mind goes there. Naturally, everybody's mind goes there, and blood cancer is no exception to that. So he thought long and hard about, do I really want to tell people? Because he doesn't want to hear that coming back at him. We want support. We want people to lift us up. We want people to, continue to really just treat us how they always have, right? Continue to be our friends, continue to root for us the same way we all root for each other. That's what friends do. We lift each other up, we root for each other, we help each other out in hard times. And so that's really all we want. And part of the initial not sharing was we didn't want that kind of backlash, if you will, of, oh my God, are you okay? And what's going on? And blah, blah, blah. But after talking through a lot of things, we also realized that there's people out there that are going to go through this that need to hear another side of it. They need to understand they're not alone in this journey. They need to know that there's good things that are going to come out on the back end of all of this. And so that's the sharing portion of it, is who else can we help that might be feeling really lonely or might be really confused or may not understand. Every cancer journey is different, and Trey's is no exception. Every diagnosis is different. How our bodies react is different. And so no two journeys are going to be the same. But I think a lot of times when we share in our little stories and we share how we got to where we are, there's always a glimmer, right? There's always a glimmer of, or a nugget of information that comes out of that, or a glimmer of happiness that comes out of that, or just continuing to spread hope. That's been my tagline for a long time now, is just spreading hope. So we're here to do that. All right, so that's 12 minutes of how we got to where we are today. Thank you for listening. I'll continue to post regular updates, just quick tidbits, and I think in the next video we'll talk about some of the things that you don't think about when you start going through chemotherapy. Thank you guys for joining me. Happy Wednesday. Take care. We're praying for you. We want you praying for us. Love y'all. Bye.